Hi and welcome to the second part of the Seagull ST1903 chronograph, and you'll note here that I'm being very careful with the screws, and that's because these are blued. They're not heat blued. I don't know if it's a chemical process or if it's some kind of coating, but what I do know is that these blued screws in Chinese movements scratch and mark very easily, hence making sure that the screwdriver is fitting well and providing a good grip. And you'll note here I dress the screwdriver tip, and this is something that happens generally throughout disassembly and reassembly of a movement, because you want a good fitting screwdriver so as not to slip and mar the screw heads. And the idea being that after you've been in a movement, disassembled, cleaned, rebuilt and lubricated it, it shouldn't be glaringly obvious by horrific marks on the screw heads that you've been in there. So dressing your screwdrivers and dressing your tweezers is something that is important. So we're removing the two tension springs that operate against the clutch lever and here the lever that bears on the pillar wheel. That particular one has a spacer underneath it, so it's important to make sure you don't lose that on refitting, and that allows the spring to sit at the correct height to bear against the post on the start lever where it bears against the pillar wheel. After removing the large screw on the start lever, I'm looking here to see if I can slide that out, and unfortunately I'm not able to, because there is still a screw in place which that sits underneath. So to get to that we'll need to remove the coupling clutch. That's held by a single screw which is shouldered and allows a little bit of lateral play. The other screw that's just underneath my carbon tweezers there is actually an eccentric and shouldn't be touched unless adjustment is required. You'll note the balance started spinning there, and that was due to knocking the fourth wheel, which is on the extended pivot, which in turn flicks the pivots and just started things spinning a little. So with that removed, I can now go ahead and remove the screw which covers up the lever which bears against the pillar wheel. And with that removed, we can lift away the start lever, which is this very long one which wraps a third of the way around the movement. Now you can see with that removed, there's the offending part in question, so we'll remove its return spring very carefully. And here we're moving the tension spring for the hammers, which is right in the way, and at which point we can lift this little fellow away and remove it from the movement and take a good close-up look at it. So moving down here and changing from voiceover mode a moment, if I can get a hold of this and bring it up into focus for you guys. This is the broken part, and it's that bit there at the bottom, this here, which is broken. Oops, hang on a second. And you can see where that's formed, and it bends over, and that forms the part of the lever that actuates when you press the reset button. Now, theoretically, you could make one of those. However, I don't have any metal stock of that kind of thickness, and that would be quite a time-consuming thing, cutting, filing, shaping and forming the bend and then heat treating it. The first thing I'm going to try and do is source a replacement, and if I cannot find a replacement for the specific Seagull one, I'm actually going to check against the Venus caliber and see if that part looks like it's the same, and perhaps replace it with that. I still have yet to find the offending broken section, so that's currently still floating around in the movement, and I need to find and remove that before any of this goes back together. And once I've gotten to that stage and got it back together and looked at it, I'll have a look at how it's running, give it a good close inspection under the scope, and see if it might benefit from a bit of a clean and service as well. It is relatively new. Let's see what we can find out. And just a little close-up showing the parts that have been removed so far and the parts that remain on there that make up the chronograph components. As you can see, there's not much of the chronograph works left there. We've got the chronograph bridge with the seconds and minute recorder. We've got the coupling wheel, the intermediate wheel for the minute recorder. We've got the hammers, and we've got the column or pillar wheel, and then just a few little levers and a minute recorder jumper. So while these often seem quite complex when you look at them complete, in many cases they're not half as complex as you'd think. The biggest problem with chronographs, especially the older style chronographs like this, I mean this is not an old chronograph, but it's certainly based on an old design, is that all of the chronograph screws tend to be different shapes, sizes, some shouldered, some not, etc. So they can be really tricky to keep in the correct place when servicing. So I always find it useful in most cases to replace the securing screws onto the bridge when performing a disassembly ready for cleaning. So that's where we are just now. I can't do anything else until I can look at finding a replacement part. So that's as far as we're going. So that's as far as we're going in this video. Thank you for watching, and we will see you in the next one, hopefully with an update on this, unless I happen to get something else out in the meantime.